We have a listener, Becca, she writes, leaving has been the single most devastating event in my life. I wish it was true sometimes just because things were so much easier then. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think about the ease of the church sort of providing everything?
Absolutely.
Versus the difficulty of forging it on your own? What would you guys say? Do you have any words of consolation for Becca?
I would say it gets easier over time.
But it's true, the church did make it easy. I mean, the church taught me, that taught my kids. I mean, it was just, I would go on Sunday and I had a bunch of friends and, you know, it was just easy. And that's why, sometimes I think that's why it's so hard to leave, is because it was easy, you know, and now all of a sudden you find yourself going, okay, well, now, you know, we have to be the ones
it's hard
doing
to
all the
away.
work, you know.
It's hard to leave.
Now it's up to us to, you know, sit down with our kids and make sure they're learning the things that they need to learn and going out and making friends, because they're not just there when we, you know.
And what can you say to Becca to help her feel better?
Well, like Laurie said, it does get better.
It does.
I think all things out of the church can tend to be a little bit harder. I mean, I'll just be honest, right? So, you know, I talk to a lot of my non-Mormon friends that I know now, and they will tell you every time they've moved, it takes a few years for that new place to feel like home. Whereas I think within the church, you can move and plug right into that word family. It can feel like home a lot quicker or sooner, right? It requires developing a different skill set that you weren't given, and you have to acquire it, and it's hard, you know, because here we are in our 40s, and the church has served everything on a silver platter to us. So now we have to go out and push outside our comfort zone and ask people, you know, would you like to go out to dinner? Would you like to do this? And you know, I think it can be a challenge depending on your personality type. There's lots of variables there, but I would just say create some goals, you know, identify what your interests are. There are lots of ways to find other people with those same interests online, and you're going to have to use those tools and resources because, you don't have that silver platter anymore.
What if somebody says your lives are all very selfish now? It's just about you and your family, and you're not in the church serving anymore, and you're probably just worrying about soccer and gymnastics, and you're more, you're making money and having fun and spending a bunch of time with your family. But what if somebody were to say your lives have turned very selfish and self-centered versus what the church would provide, which is continual focus on others and serving others and benefiting others?
Time-wise, I think it does feel that way sometimes, because it's like, if you think about how much time every week you served in the church, you know, I mean, I've had callings where you had multiple days of the week for several hours, you had meetings, and then you would have to go on visits, and then you'd have meetings on Sunday before and after your 3-hour block church meeting. So if you add up all of that time given to church and compare it to how much time you give to things other than your family now, I would say if you're going just by that, maybe that's true. But if you think about what the service really is in the church, it's almost circular. I mean, my favorite example is when in a ward where I was taught, we were asked by the bishop to please let your home teachers come over. Please let them come serve you. And now you feel obligated to let your home teachers come over. And it's like, wait, I thought they were here to serve us, and now I feel like I'm serving them. And it's like you start realizing as you're home teaching, and this is why I had such a hard time with it, most of the people don't want you there. Now, once in a while you have somebody who really has a need and they want you there, but most of them are like, all right, come over, but you can't stay very long, you know, and then it turns into this big long conversation, and then, you know, you're teaching people who are feeling obligated to come to church in the first place. So it's like your calling is you teach on Sunday, and that's your service, but they're almost forcing people to go to Sunday so that they can be taught. You know, it's like this circular kind of service, and so in that way, a lot of those hours that you spent, you can kind of, I don't feel bad about not doing them anymore, you know. But I do think that service is the hardest thing now. It takes more individual, it's more of your responsibility to go out and find service. And it is harder to do because it's not given to you. But it doesn't mean that
But there
you
are
don't
good
want
opportunities
to.
out
There are
there.
opportunities.
For
We
sure.
when we come across them, we definitely jump on.
But I
them
don't
and
think spending that extra time with your family is selfish. I mean, if we don't know what's beyond this life, I think right now the most important thing is our family and our friends.
And yeah,
you know.
that's a good point. I mean, think about the time I spent in meetings when who knows, shouldn't I have been with my children? You know, I mean,
Well, family comes first.
family
right?
should come first.
Right,
yeah.
and that's what we're taught in the church: family, family, family. Yet there were many Sundays Doug was gone from 7 in the morning to
Yeah.
6 o'clock at night.
You wouldn't see him at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
What about just, have you guys found worthy charitable opportunities to either give time or money to?
one of our favorite things when we were actually when Doug quit going to church and I was still going is one Sunday a month I wouldn't go, none myself or the kids, and we would
Fast
go.
Sunday.
Oh yeah, we would do it on Fast Sunday. On Fast Sundays, we would go to the Ronald McDonald House. They're in Salt Lake, and they have opportunities for a family or a group to come in. You have to provide all of the food. You know, they have a big kitchen. You go down, you make the meal, and it's for anyone there or any parents or family that has a child at Primary Children's Hospital, and they can just come in and get a warm meal and take a little break. And that was amazing. That has been one of my very favorite things that we have done with our kids, and just our little family would do it. And our oldest son would take his guitar and he'd sit, you know, after the meal was prepared, he'd sit in the corner and play his guitar. And we got the opportunity, you know, to just talk with these families that were going through a very difficult time in their life, and it was amazing. So they're great, and that's just one small example of something that we've done. But
Take the money we would have given as a fast
Yeah.
offering, go to Sam's Club,
buy a bunch of
make a
food.
meal, deliver to the Ronald McDonald House, and serve it.
Yeah.
And we spent 3 hours together as a family. Saw, you know, our efforts directly impacting people's lives, and saw that face to face. And we were together as a family instead of split up into primary, Relief Society, and priesthood quorums.
And we left there all on a high, happy as a family, grateful for what we had, grateful to be able to serve. It was great. Our kids
Yeah.
loved it.
So you have to put in more effort. It's not just, oh, hey, you get an email from the Relief Society saying, we're going to be making meals for this family and taking them over. And all you got to do is make the meal and show up. So the planning's all taken care of for you. Yeah, you do have to work a little bit harder at it, but that's not to say that we're selfish now. And, you know, we have non-member friends, and ironically, non-member friends get sick and need casseroles. And ironically, they need you to run over and pick their kid up from school because they're at work, and their child is sick, and you need to take them home and make sure they're okay. So, like Jerry said, the service that you give in the church is mainly to the church when you sit down and you analyze it and think about it.
Yeah,
Any other
absolutely.
charities you guys support, or
Well, there's this one,
which one?
Open
Open
Stories.
Stories.
I mean,
Okay.
I you know,
Why do you support the Open Stories?
well, because it helped us so much, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it was, we didn't talk about it very much, but listening to the stories of other people really helped us get through our faith crisis. And, you know, it's funny because we don't think of them at service, but we have just meetings that we have with our friends now who have left the church, and the conversations that we have. I have a really good friend I work out with every week, and the conversations we have, and I know that you know those conversations help me, and I'm sure it helps him, and there's so many different ways. Every day you have opportunities to reach out and help people, and when you actually, you know, you can actually see the results there, you know.
But we've done things with our kids too. We've gone to like a men's home and fed them. Our girls did a project for Children's Hospital collecting baby blankets. I've taken my girls to work on female kits for girls in Africa. And, you know, there is a million
There's so many different things you can do.
that can be done out there, you know, and just giving money to families who their home burns down. You know, you read in the newspaper and you send them, you know, there's a GoFundMe and you put some money in that account, or, you know,
Providing a Christmas. For
yeah, I mean,
someone,
all
or
of that,
Thanksgiving
you know.
dinner.
But
Absolutely.
it just takes effort. You just got to keep your eye open for
Yeah,
things.
and it's, I mean, it's easy to find, really, if you go looking for it. There's a million things you can do, small to big.
Another listener asked what you've done with the spiritual experiences that you did have. Oftentimes, when you had the spiritual experience, you interpreted it as the church being true and you wanted to follow it. Now you're stuck no longer believing, but still having to recognize that you had that witness at that time that you interpreted in that way. What have you done with those witnesses?
That's a whole podcast. But I will tell you something really, really small that actually happened to me, and that is because like I had said, I've had a ton of little experiences where I felt something and I followed that prompting and I felt like it was the right thing to do. While we were going through our crisis, we had a trip with our staff to Palm Springs, and on the way home we were returning the rented vehicles that we had, and I had this really strong feeling I needed to go through this van again to make sure nobody left anything. And so I was handing the keys. I said, "No, I got to run back. Just give me a second." And I checked, and there was the package of one of our staff. He's a diabetic, and it was his tester and his insulin and that thing. And I remember in that moment I was like, "Wow, what was that? Was that the Spirit telling me, I should go back and that I should go back and check that van?" And I thought, okay, I need to find this out. Is this really the Spirit? And I can't just, in order to get rid of confirmation bias, I have to pay more attention to every time I feel that thought and see if it truly turns into something. So I paid a lot of attention, and Julie and I travel a lot, and I realized that before that event and after, every time I turn in a rental car, I get this deep feeling that I need to check it. Every single time. And I've only found something once or twice, right? And every time we go to bed, I get this really strong feeling we need to check and make sure the doors are locked, right? And Julie gets that more than I do, and she jumps up and checks. And only once in a while is the door unlocked. And every time my daughter went out she had a weekly youth thing that she would go to, and she was a new driver, and it was dark and rainy. Every time she left, I had this deep feeling that she's going to get in an accident and something bad's going to happen. And
she never did.
And she never did. Now, had she gotten in an accident, that would have been a confirmation bias. I would have confirmed my feelings, and I would have known that was God telling me that should have happened. And I started paying attention, and I realized we get these feelings all the time, and it's when they're correct that we go, aha, this is something that's coming from God. And then I started realizing that, like for instance, when I prayed about the Book of Mormon and prayed about the church, it was following what Moroni said, which is you have to pray believing. Basically, you want it to be true, and that's what you're praying for. And basically you're begging, please tell me that this is true, which instead of it being a scientific, okay, is this true? Or why don't you tell me that it's not true? Or, it's so dependent on your belief. And as somebody who has done studies on people and knows what the placebo effect is, the definition of a placebo effect is it needs belief to work. You cannot have a placebo effect without somebody believing it's going to work or knowing something about it, right? And so a true scientific experiment would be to get rid of anything that would cause a placebo effect. And so I realized that that's what I had my whole life. It was a placebo effect, and mixed with confirmation bias, where if you think about how many seconds there are in the day, how many seconds there are in a year, and how many coincidences you should have in a year, there's a certain amount you should have just by random chance. But every time there's a coincidence, you chalk it up for, this is something that God's telling me. It's like, oh my gosh, this happened and this happened at the same time. That must mean, ask yourself, okay, how many times do you have coincidences in your life? And it's very seldom. It's like, well, that's normal. In a world of complete randomness, you should have coincidences every once in a while. It just adds up that way. And so that was kind of how I see it.
If you were to walk into another church, any other religion, Church of the Ozarks or whatever, right? And you were to watch their little children every first Sunday of the month walk up to a pulpit and say, I know the Church of the Ozarks is true. I know that, our leader of the Church of Ozarks is Jim Bob is God's true prophet. And you watch this line of little children taking their turn at the pulpit. And then if you were to read the Church of the Ozarks materials where it said, you know, the only way you're going to know if the Church of the Ozarks is God's true church is if you first believe it is God's true church, and then you pray and ask God. And then if you're not feeling it, you know, the best way to get that faith is to get it on while you're saying that you believe, is to get up and bear your testimony about the Church of the Ozarks. And that's when you'll get your experience. And you know, what you should do is maybe you should sit down and record yourself saying, you know, I believe in the Church of the Ozarks, and then listen to it at night, right? If you were to watch those people, you would say they are, you know, deceiving. Self-deception. It's you're brainwashing yourself, and then you're eventually telling, and then if you see the people of the Church of the Ozarks teaching their youth, you just need to recognize that you already have faith in this church. It's very easy to sit back and look at another religion and recognize that that isn't a true testimony or a true belief. That's conditioning, right? But it's very hard to look in the mirror at our own faith tradition and recognize we're doing the exact same thing. And so when you ask me what do I feel about my prior spiritual experiences, I would say I put them in the same category as a person who is a member of another church who is basically taught the exact same thing, because you can get online and you can hear them bearing their testimonies just like we do in Fast and Testimony, and you can see the same types of techniques and conditioning being utilized in those other faith traditions all around the world. So,
But it was hard though, right? I mean, I think we all had to go through that, because that is a deep, if you truly are conditioned, it's deep and it is hard. So if somebody's going through that and they're having that right now, it's not unusual to take time to get over. I mean, I've seen Jehovah's Witnesses go through major stress as they have their first birthday party celebration. You know, it's a deep embedded thing, and it's hard to get over sometimes.
and all you have to do is get on Reddit and look at the subreddits for the different religious traditions, whether it's ex-Mormon Reddit or ex-Jehovah Witness or ex-whatever, ex-Catholic. It's all the same thing, right? And so spiritual experiences, in my opinion, are in the mind of the beholder.
It's an emotional thing, I think.
Scott writes, my testimony in the gospel is very strong, but the church is just not what it claims to be. That's Scott's view. Yeah. What about spirituality? Does spirituality mean anything to you now? Do you have it? Do you pursue it? Do you care about it? Is it stronger than ever?
It's hard to explain.
Yeah, it is hard to explain, because I still feel like I need something, and whether that spirituality comes from just my own heart and the things that I hope that are true, or taking time for myself to meditate and just, be aware of my own surroundings and my family. And for me right now, that's kind of what it is. I still do pray, just because I hope that those prayers are going somewhere. But you know what? I think it's going to be a long journey. I mean, because nobody knows, right? There's no for sure. So I think it's just a matter of figuring out what I am comfortable with, and if I want to believe, or, in something, I have the right to believe in whatever I want. If it makes me feel good, if I'm not doing harm to anyone and it's something that makes me feel good, then I don't see any harm in that.
What's emotional to you about talking about spirituality?
Because it's hard, because for, 40 years, I believed in something very strongly. I mean, wholeheartedly. And for that to just shatter, it's hard to pick up the pieces and try and figure out what you still believe.
Yeah.
But the spirituality as defined in Mormonism, though, I mean, if you think about what it is, you did things to feel peace, right? So it's like you went to church because you wanted to feel that peace. You read the scriptures because you wanted to feel that peace. That peace is still there. We just sometimes you define it differently, you know. And so when you ask somebody about spirituality, because it has the word spirit in it, people go, well, I don't know how to answer it. But in truth, we're still looking for that same feeling of peace. And you still get that. You still get that peace when you do something nice for somebody. You get that peace when you discover something about yourself or about other people that makes you more empathetic. You know, learning about how the mind works and how people think helps me give peace because I understand them more. And that, to me, is what I defined previously as spirituality. I don't know that I use that same word, but it's the same idea. You're still looking for those very same feelings. And having had 40 years in the church, I know what those feelings feel like. And these are the very same feelings. And it is... you're both, you know, people who say, oh, I go to church so I can, you know, have those feelings. Well, guess what? Same here. It's just a different method of getting the same feelings. And you still feel that way when you you know, you strive to be a good person. That brings me peace. And so, yeah, so I still do that. And I consciously do it. When we pray now, because we still pray as a couple, but my prayers are not asking some being to do things for me anymore. My prayers are for Julie and I to meditate and say what we're going to do together, and it's to remind us of our part. So if we have somebody in need, we don't just go, God, can you please help that person so we don't have to think about it anymore. It's, okay, let's think about it ourselves and what can we do for this person. So.
How about for you, Laurie?
I think, like Jerry said, just wanting still that feeling of peace that we felt at church and finding it in different ways. To be honest, when I was sitting at church, I usually felt peace, or what we would refer to as the spirit, through a musical number. I can still do that now. I find a lot of peace through music. I find a lot of peace through, you know, going outside and being in nature and going down and sitting at the beach. Now, living here in California and hearing the waves and just kind of meditating and just finding, you know, I can watch a great movie and I can still get that feeling of peace or the spirit, just like I did, you know, at church. To be honest, I didn't usually sit at church and sit and listen to a talk about Joseph Smith and have this overwhelming peace. I really didn't, you know what I mean? I felt the spirit mainly through music and through personal stories, and I still get that. I still get that now. And yeah, it may be harder because I usually felt that peace every Sunday through the music, the opening song, the closing song, you know, and stuff. But so for me, it's just finding peace in other ways.
Margot wants to know who you guys pray to when you pray.
We don't say a name.
You don't say Heavenly Father? How come?
Well, I don't know what it... I mean, I was taught to say Heavenly Father. It's kind of like somebody said, you know, God's name is Zeus. It's like, oh, that's nice, but I don't know that's true. And it's like I said, I don't know that we're praying to someone either. It's just that was our tradition that we had, and we taught our kids, you can pray however you want. And a few of our kids still do the Mormon prayer because that's what they're used to, and our older kids, they'll just say whatever they want.
Like, you know, if nothing else, just putting positive energy out there.
Yeah, just being thankful for
say what you're grateful for.
Yeah, and so we don't want people to feel like, you know, in our house they have to believe in a being and pray to him and beg him to do something. It's more of just a time to be thankful, and there you go.
I have found when we've talked to a number of people about what's happening with us, that's usually the question they want to go to right off the bat, which is, okay, well, what do you now believe? And it scares them if you tell them, look, I really don't know what I believe, right? And then what ends up happening is they don't want to go through the process of invalidating or validating, you know, these things in church history, right? Because
they don't want to end up in that hole.
If I invalidate Mormonism, then I'm going to become an atheist, and I don't want to become an atheist, so I'm not going to look at church history. And so I tend to not like answering that question because I feel like everybody really has to like answer the first thing first, which is, did golden plates really exist? Did Lamanites and Nephites really exist? Did these things really get translated, or are they fictitious? Those are the questions that should be answered, and then you can build upon those things and and go wherever it goes. But I find that question to be somewhat dangerous sometimes, because then it discourages people from wanting to answer the questions that they should be focusing on right now, because they're putting the cart before the horse. But I just, I don't pray. I went through the process of, once I learned about the book of Abraham and view of the Hebrews and archaeology and DNA, it's like, okay, what's next? Okay, well, what about the Old Testament? What about the New Testament? And for me, I had that pivotal experience on my mission where, I saw a number of people in a room visibly moved watching this, archaeology video from the church that has since been completely debunked and retired and isn't used because all the evidence, wasn't true, right? And I sat in that room and watched people get emotional as I was bearing testimony that these things are true and this means the Book of Mormon's true. And if people can feel the Spirit while they're hearing things that aren't true, it's not necessarily a reliable way to find truth, in my opinion. And that's just the way I feel. So my spirituality at this point is really, I love to learn. And so I spend a lot of time reading books and listening to podcasts and just trying to learn as much as I can about the world around me. I love Malcolm Gladwell and This American Life, and whatever I can, and that's where I find my peace, is just through learning.
I have a thought that, so I've said this before to family members as they were asking us what we believe, and I said, okay, put yourself in this position. Okay, let's say there's a God and there's a judgment. So God's up there and there's two people in front of him. Both of them have done the same thing in this life, exactly the same thing. They've done the same deeds. They've been great people. They have given to charity. If you just add up all the things that they've done, it's the same. And God turns to one of them and says, you have done such a great job in life. Tell me why. And he looks up and he says, well, because you told me to. I read your Bible, and your Bible told me to do well. And I read, I had this pastor, and this pastor told me that God wanted me to, told me that you said I'm supposed to be a good person. And he goes, oh, that's great. He turns to the other person and said, you did the same thing. Tell me why. And he says, I didn't even know you existed. I just did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. Which one is God going to be more impressed with, right? So it doesn't scare me to be wrong if I'm doing my best to be the best person I can be. Because if anything, God would be impressed and go, you did that without specific that secret note that I sent down, you didn't see it? That other guy saw it, didn't you see it? I mean, if I'm wrong, I just live my life as if every day there are things that come at me that are tests, and I want to know that I pass those tests. I don't literally believe that somebody's giving me the test, but I live as if they are tests. And one of the big tests in my life was this experience, and I wholeheartedly believe I passed that test. I mean, I think of all the things that we've gone through, the decisions that we made, the times that all of these moments, it was pivoting on what to say, like that time I had that talk with Laurie. I don't know why it went that way, but I feel like that I passed the test in that moment. I feel like I did the right thing, and I feel really good about where we are because of it.
So, ladies, some would say the Mormon Church is a little bit patriarchal.
Nah.
And once the church falls, then sometimes maybe, and maybe relationships, maybe Mormon relationships at times, Mormon marriages can reflect that patriarchy, maybe. And then maybe once the patriarchy is no longer believed in, maybe the balance of power, the power dynamics can change in a marriage once the patriarchy's been dismantled. Has any of this impacted your relationships with your husband or not?
No, I don't think so. I think we were always team players. I was happy and wanted Doug to take the lead on certain things, but I always felt like we made decisions together, and he was not the last word in our home. We discussed things, we made decisions together, and so I don't think anything has really changed. Do you? I think we still just work together and
Yeah, and I
We're
think
team players.
I think we're both kind of hard workers. We don't, one of us isn't sitting on the couch while the other one's cleaning
Not at
dishes.
all.
Like, I like to cook. I do a lot of the cooking. Lori likes to garden. She's tended to take care of our yard. So, we're both pretty hard workers, and we like to have a nice, orderly home. And
we just work together to.
yeah, I think the
keep
workload's
things
pretty
going and-
evenly split, and we just, we just do things that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
That's
about,
us. That's
how
us.
about you guys?
It's us too. I think we've always been pretty 50-50, I always told him, you can have the priesthood. That can be, I didn't care.
But
That can be all yours.
Doug
but
and I, it wasn't really in our nature to use the priesthood against them. though.
it never was. And I think, it's always been,
I could see that as
50-50.
being a problem,
Oh,
though,
sure.
in some circumstances, for
Absolutely.
sure.
Yeah, I
It's
have
like,
friends where it is a problem.
Yeah.
But it wasn't.
it
and
was
that would
not
be
us,
that would be a big role shift for sure, But
yeah.
no, I think
Not
it's
an
always
issue.
been kind of.
Have any of you had to face this sense of like, I would have made very different decisions if the church, if I had, known the truth about the church, and even regrets about things you didn't do or should have done or had done that you wish you hadn't done? Or are you all pretty at peace with?
I'm, you know what,
peace. I
I'm
wouldn't have
totally
changed
fine with the way
anything.
I've lived my life so far. I wouldn't have changed anything.
Me
I
either.
would have still married him. I absolutely love him. I think I still would have had 5 kids.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I've done that I regret. There's nothing that I would go back and change. There's just not. I mean, I was happy then, and I'm perfectly happy now.
Nice. Okay. Were there any wonderful surprises that came from your faith crisis? Just things that like, oh my gosh, this is a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And if so, what?
So we had one. Julie will do it.
Are you getting emotional?
A little bit.
Yeah,
why?
thanks a lot. No, I'm going to do that one.
No, I'm just kidding.
We had been out of the church for probably about 8 months. And I was in the kitchen one day, and my daughter came in, and I could tell that she just had that look on her face that just no parent ever wants to see. I could tell something was just, eating her up inside. And she came in the kitchen, and she sat there and was just sobbing. And I was like, please, what is wrong? And she's like, I can't tell you. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. You need to tell me. Obviously something is really bothering you. And I'm not going to let you leave this room until we talk about it, because, I had never seen her so distraught before. And I don't know how long, 5-10 minutes of me just, saying, it's okay, let's talk about, I don't know what it is, but please tell me what it is. And in my head, I'm thinking, she's, been molested, she's been raped, that something horrible has happened. Because she just kept saying, I can't tell you. And I'm thinking, you have to tell me, And she finally just asked, she's like, can I write it down? I'm like, yes. So I grabbed a pen and a piece of paper, and she wrote it down and passed it to me, and it just said, I'm not straight. And I looked at her and I said, okay, is that it? Because that's not a big deal. That's fine. I still love you. That changes nothing, Luckily enough, we had already been out of the church for, I think, about 8 months at this point. And she knew where we stood on gays. Jerry's brother is gay. We absolutely love and support his brother. We have other good friends of our family that are gay, and we absolutely love them and support them. It's never been an issue in our home that it's wrong or it's,
Well, no, it has. That's the miracle of what happened is we have always been tolerant of homosexuality because of my brother and other people that we know, but we still taught that it was wrong, but that we love them anyway. It's kind of like that the cringeworthy hate the sin, love the sinner, right? And so what happened was when we went, the second our bubble popped, I swear, the second it popped, the first thing I thought of was, oh my gosh, there's nothing wrong with being gay. I mean, it's not about just loving him anyway. Like, why on earth would there be something wrong with somebody wanting to have a relationship with someone that they love, a consensual, loving relationship? And it just was instantaneous. And if you ever ask the question, what would you think if somebody wasn't telling you what to think? It was answered right there, because I had been told what to think. And the second I realized that was wrong, and we both were like, oh my gosh. So there was a change in our philosophy from, be open and loving to there's literally nothing wrong with it. And so Brittany already knew that. I mean, she knew.
And even her knowing that and knowing, that we really would be fine with it, it was still extremely scary for her to tell us, even though I think she pretty much knew how we would react, And so, I sat there and I just loved her and gave her a hug and just said, Brittany, it's totally fine. We love you no matter what. And, so I said, okay, well, we're not going to call Dad at work. We're not, wait till he gets home and we can talk to him then. And so we came home and I was like, come in the bedroom. We need to talk about something. And so she came in and told Jerry. And what was your response?
I told her, you could have just told me that you actually were a redhead and not a blonde and you've been hiding it all this time. I mean, it was the same thing, We're like, we don't care. And poor Britt, because it was still so hard for her. And she had been going through this, for her it was difficult kind of figuring the whole thing out and realizing it. And then having to come out and tell people about it. It's a personal thing. Heterosexuals don't have to go tell everybody that they're heterosexual. And it's still an awkward thing to say, even if the person's going to accept you. And so she was so sweet about it, but she still had a really hard time saying the words. She would just say, I'm not straight, I think I'm bi, that kind of thing. And it took her a while before she finally could admit, okay, no, I'm gay. I mean, I'm not attracted to men at all, And so she was still going kind of through that at the time. And
she told us that she had been, looking back now, she realizes that those feelings started when she was probably in like 5th grade. She didn't really understand what it was back then. But, as she's going through high school and she's going out with boys, but yet she's really looking elsewhere, looking at girls when she's out with a boy or whatever, it really started to hit her. And then she said when the November 15 policy came out, she goes, for some reason, she said, that really struck a chord with me. And she goes, it was then that I really realized why, And so, I mean, Jerry and I were just so incredibly grateful that we were out of the church at that point. We'd already been out for quite some time, because I thought I would never want to try and force her to live a homosexual life within the church, because there's no life there,
She was ready to get marry a man. I mean, she told me that she wasn't attracted to men, but she liked guys, and she knew that that's what it was supposed to be. So her whole life she was ready to do it. And it's quite possible that if we were still in the church, that's exactly where she would have gone. And that's exactly what my brother did. And I look back at the difference between the two of them. My brother did not come out of the closet until he just literally exploded inside. I mean, he did everything, tried to assimilate, tried to just be like everybody else. And the thought of my daughter going through that just kills me. I just can't even fathom it. And the fact that she was able to come out at this age and live an authentic life and be happy and not live, I mean, I don't know if it's stereotypical, but guys kind of want physical relationship, and she would have married some guy and it would have just been platonic. And that's not, it's difficult. That's very, very difficult. And so the fact that she can be authentic now, it just, every time we think about it, it just makes us cry a little bit, because we are so grateful that she had that ability to live a real life and not have to do something that she didn't have to do.
Well, and that she felt comfortable coming out to us, you know, and letting us know rather than just keeping it inside and, you know, going away to school and maybe trying
First
to
to
figure
herself,
it out.
and then to you.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. You know, and for me, I was glad for myself to be out of the church, because I thought, how could I be part of an organization that doesn't accept my own child? You know, and if you knew her, she is like the sweetest, kindest person, you know, and I thought, how could someone not accept her? How could you not love her? And how would I mean, I don't know. I wasn't in the church, so I don't know, but I just thought, wow, I'm glad I don't have to even make that decision, because I think it would be really hard to be in the church, part of an organization that doesn't accept the way your child is. And I know there's plenty of people out there that do it. But I think that would be really hard.
My sister was telling me about a family member, you know, somebody that she knows that her child came out as being gay, and she was like, yeah, he's going through a really hard time. The parent is what she was saying, you know, trying to deal with this. And in that moment I realized, oh my gosh, I have nothing to deal with. I'm not having a hard time. I mean, why is nobody consoling us because our child is gay? It's because we don't need to be consoled, you know? There's nothing there to console. I'm not being stretched. I'm not being torn between two things. I'm not, and it's just amazing that we were able to do that. So I mean, that was a big. I was telling you earlier about the best moment of my life as a parent was when Brittany came out to her sisters. And so her twin sister, who was, were they both 18 at the time? 17, 18 at the time. And then her sister was 13 at the time. And Julie and I were there to support Brittany, but she told them. And, you know, there's those moments when, you know, like when you have somebody comes over and does something nice to for your child, and you hope they say thank you, and you're like, and you go, what do you say? Thank
You're
you.
a little nervous that they're maybe not going to say the right thing.
You're nervous how they're going to respond, right? And so we were a little nervous. I mean, we didn't prepare these girls for anything, and we're like, okay, let's see what they believe, you know. And it was amazing. Brittany came out to them, and they were just like, so? They're like,
Oh my God.
someone's at the door. Someone really wants to come in.
What'd they say?
They just said, that doesn't mean anything. You know, they gave her hugs. I'm like, yeah. And it hasn't been a thing. It hasn't been a thing since. And
they both just grabbed her and hugged her.
Yeah.
And we're just like, okay, Brett, that's fine. That doesn't matter to us. You know, and it was.
And you could tell they
awesome.
weren't saying things like, we love you anyway. They weren't saying we love you in spite of what you're doing. They just fully accepted her. They're just like, oh yeah. And then they talked about it a little bit. And then we went and told our twin boys a little bit later. Now they are 10. And they were the same way. 10-year-old boys. You know, when I was that age, oh man, I don't even know what I would have said back then. I mean, like I said, you know, during that time, we didn't even know really what gay was. Gay was another way of saying you're an idiot, you know. It's like, dude, you're so gay. And now, you know, we have a new generation, and these kids are just completely accepting of it. And so that, to me, that was just the best thing ever, is how my kids, that, you know, and that just made me feel like we did something right with those guys, because they
In that moment we did.
and that was the only thing, but that was, in that moment, that was so cool.
And now she's been able to live an authentic life. You know, she's very open. She talks to us very openly about it, you know, and it's good.
Yeah, it's great to talk about. And she comes and talks to about stuff all the time. And I just love it. And it's hard. I'll tell you, the hard thing about it is the dating pool shrinks. You know, when you send your kids to college, you want them to have opportunities to date all the time. And the hardest thing with Brittany is that it's so much harder for her to find dates, you know, because it.
And she's also quiet.
And
too.
she's quiet, but I mean, it's not as easy as when you can just assume the person over there is heterosexual and you can, you know, make a pass at them or something.
And all of our friends and family that all of our family knows, and some of our friends know, and now anyone who watches this knows.
Yeah.
But we had her permission. We talked to her first.
Doesn't matter.
No.
We love her.
They've been great.
Yeah, she's
So
amazing.
she knows she has a lot of support.
Doug and Laurie and their family, the exact same. I mean, when Brittany told Jordan and Chloe together, right? Isn't that?
All of us.
All
yeah,
of you.
except him.
And they were awesome. And Tanner, it was what, 11, 12
Yeah,
at the
he
time?
was- Yeah, 12.
12. Brittany wasn't there when he found out, and he somehow got her phone number and texted her this cute little message about it. It was so cool.
It's really
Yeah.
sweet about how our differences are what make us all great. And he's like, I love you. It doesn't matter. You know, our differences are what make us great. So it was really sweet.
And what bothers me now is the idea of not talking to your young kids about this, because it's a thing, you know? And the other day, my son was asking me about transgender. He's like, now tell me about what transgender means. And it's like, I can't imagine, you know, you talk to your kids about heterosexual relationships. Why aren't you talking to them about all relationships? You don't have to share gory details of acts, right? I mean, you wouldn't do that about a heterosexual situation either. You just share that these are two loving people who want, you know, who have every right to love each other, and you do it at a young age. There's no reason why not to. And it's offensive now when I hear, well, what about the children? You need to keep it away from the children. No, you don't. No, you don't.
We've had a lot of powerful, experiences. Our two families, with that, right before we were moving down to California, I ended up, earlier last year, getting an opportunity with a new company who wanted us to move to California, and that was sad to have to pack up and move away from them. And then literally almost the night before we moved was the night that they had us sit down, and Brittany wanted to talk to our kids and tell them. And that's just a moment you'll always treasure, and the way our children all just gave them hugs and loved each other. And my oldest son, being the somewhat inappropriate person that he is, lightening the mood, and so but just always treasure that moment.
Couple comments from our listeners. Tracy writes, "This is all wonderful." Marino writes, "Blessings to you, Jerry and Julie, and to your precious and courageous Brit." Anne writes, "What awesome parents. Our children should always be chosen over some church." Lynn Moore, shout out to Lynn Moore. She writes, "It's genetic." I'm not sure what comment she was referring to.
It's a biological.
Yeah. That being
it's not a choice, right?
Yeah, being LGBT,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Tom writes, "A lot of Mormons are leaving in the Ladera Rancho Santa Margarita community."
That's
Do you guys-
us. That's
Do you have
us.
any comments about that?
Dude,
Is that true?
Have you guys been reaching out?
We don't know
You
yet,
would
but
know.
we've been
Contact
looking
them.
into it. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's what Tom is saying.
Yeah,
And that's another thing I'd actually like to say is that for anyone that is in a situation where they're wavering or going through a faith crisis, we live up in the Kitsap County area of Washington, and we are open to, people who want to talk or get together, or we have a group that we get together with and talk for hours at a time. And if you're LGBT and you're struggling, we're a safe place.
yeah, we would echo that.
Yeah,
as
because
well.
I know it's hard. It's hard to feel like you're the only ones. Now, granted, I always had them, but just even still feeling like you feel so alone going through this, and our door's always open for anybody,
Yeah.
who needs support.
Beautiful. Thank you. You guys, any unforeseen blessings? I don't expect you to have some epic story like that.
We don't.
But, but is there any surprise, positive, negative, gift or blessing that's come out of this whole faith crisis for you?
Well, I think just in Julie and Jerry's situation, it was a blessing for us where we were at too, having gone through this, to be able to just wrap our arms around sweet little Brittany. We love her like a daughter, you know? So that was a blessing for our family and for our children. It didn't matter to them, you know, because we had had a lot of discussions and stuff, you know, exiting the church and the November policy and stuff. And so that was a blessing for us as well.
I think the fact that you guys were able to move to Seattle for that year,
yeah,
right? I mean, right by us, as we're all going through all of this, we were able to be there
together
for
talk
that
about
for
it,
that
and
year,
for
you know, that
sure,
was
the
really rough.
support, and it was amazing. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything?
I guess that would just be the miracle that I had the ability to move our family. I recognize that that's a blessing. Not very many people can, have the choice to pack up and move and start a new life somewhere else. That's a tiny miracle. The fact that miracle just so happened to be right by these two. Mm-hmm. That's a tiny miracle. The fact that my son was admitted to the University of Washington, one of his top choices, and he's able to go study marine biology is something that he's passionate about. That's a tiny miracle. Whereas if this maybe necessarily wouldn't happen, he would have, I'm sure, gone off to BYU or whatever, and maybe done accounting or something else because they don't have marine biology there. So Jordan gets to do his life's passion. So there's lots of tiny little miracles. And then the year that we got to spend together, supporting one another and leaning on one another, that in itself is a miracle. And then finally with being able to, experience this with Brittany was just awesome,
And I would guess that if you flash back, several years to where Doug is sitting there, stressing about the effects of what he was about to do, what he was about to tell Laurie, the decision he made to finally come out. I would probably say this is your best case scenario.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How this all turned out, because he says yes. His mic's not working, but he says yes. But yeah, I can imagine how you think of all the different scenarios that can happen to you, and the fact that it did turn out. It doesn't always happen that way.
I'm sure in his wildest dreams he never thought he'd be sitting here with us.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time, just where we're at now. It's amazing,
A couple just little comments. One is that so many people, when they experience a faith crisis, let's say one of the parents believes and one doesn't, or some of the kids choose to go to church and then others don't. There's this real sense of fear and even feeling petrified. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. We're not all unified. We're on different pages. Someone may come out as LGBT or not. And the one of the gifts that I just want to emphasize is this idea that this is an incredible opportunity to model that what family means is a loving and embracing of differences. And you think of that as a Mormon because everybody's got to be on plan and everybody's got to be uniform and everybody's got to be all in. You think it was terrifying when somebody's off plan or fundamentally different. And what you learn is this is an incredible opportunity, as you guys experienced, to communicate to all family members. It doesn't matter if you believe or don't believe, if you attend or don't attend, if you're straight or gay or trans, whatever. If you even make a big mistake, drink or smoke or try drugs or have premarital sex, whatever it is, you are loved unconditionally. And that is a huge gift to anyone involved in that experience. Yes. And it's and you don't think of it that way, but it is.
It is.
There's the one point that Laurie kind of brought up, and that is how much of what the decisions we make as parents have to do with how embarrassed we're going to be, right? Which, if you think about it, is just awful. It's like, is how you treat your daughter when she comes and tells you that she's pregnant, or that, you know, she did something wrong, or your son tells you that they got a girl pregnant. Is your next decision, how much of it is based upon how embarrassed you are and how embarrassed your family's going to be because of this? And you got to rethink that. If you're making a decision as a parent because you have to face up to your tribe and you're worried about what your tribe thinks, you better rethink how you're going to react to that, you know? And that's one of the things that I think is nice now, is that you're not embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed by anything. My child could tell me anything. It's like, I don't care. I love you. You're still my child. I don't have to, like, you know, worry about what somebody else is going to say. But if you're in a situation where you do have to worry what someone else is going to say, rethink how you treat your child or your loved one, your husband, your wife. If in any way it's based upon you being embarrassed that you have to face your family or your church, right? I mean, I think that's a good take-home message.
Totally. So I think we're kind of coming towards the end.
Can you believe it?
You guys, it's,
My gosh.
it's almost 6 o'clock. So that's, I don't know, 7-8 hours.
Wow.
Of, maybe I'm miscounting, maybe less than
And we
that,
were
I'm not
worried
sure.
we'd have enough material.
Any other final words of wisdom, costs, benefits that anybody wants to share as just a way to wrap up? Is it, well, any of that, or is it overselling this to say it's been a gift to have the faith crisis?
It is and it isn't. I think we got to be careful not to make it sound like every situation turns out to be good, or that the results of your situation is determined by whether it was right or wrong. You know, people make right decisions and are punished for it all the time, right? That's why sometimes making the right decision is hard. And so if you're going through it and you see that there is a possibility that things can work out, and it's because there is, you know, things can work out. But also you don't want to sugarcoat it and make it sound like everything is the same. Everybody's going to have the same experience and it's always going to be good, and it's always at some point going to work out, because, you know, it doesn't always. And that's why when we talked about reality before, we live in a real world. We have to deal with reality, and good and bad things happen all the time. And sometimes you do have to stand up and do what is right in spite of what the results are.
I feel in a lot of ways you and I actually kind of got off easy, you know.
Oh, we did. There's no doubt about it.
Compared especially to Laurie and Doug, you know, we were able to do this together. We were able to, you know, process the whole thing together, and our bishop...
At the expense of Laurie and Doug. I mean, it's because
Right.
of their experience that it helped us.
Are you guys grateful to Doug
Absolutely.
for what he endured?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, but I even think about, you know, the way our bishop handled it and our stake president. I mean, really, we've just kind of floated through. And the fact that our marriage never went through a rocky point. I mean, I really just feel very grateful for all these little things, you know, because I realize there are people out there that it's not easy. And it's, you know, there's some really rocky things going on. So, you know, for those little things I'm extremely grateful for, you know, because I know it's not always easy.
But it's kind of funny, like Doug and I have talked about this, even though we went through a really rough patch and it was really rocky and it was really hard, we're so grateful for how everything turned out. We feel so lucky. You know, we feel so lucky that our marriage is strong and that our kids are thriving and that we have Julie and Jerry, and that our extended family was, you know, accepting of us and still love us. And we have a lot to be grateful for, even though it was a hard road, you know. And I think my words of wisdom or advice would be to anyone out there who is struggling, who there is a believing member and a non-believing member, please don't give up. You know, on both sides, don't give up. Don't give up on the other. Do not let the church ruin your marriage. Do not let this information ruin your marriage, because it's not worth it. You know, and that's what I had to realize, that I loved Doug so much that no matter what, nothing was going to ruin my marriage. Nothing was going to come between us and split up our sweet little family. You know, and so if there's even one person that heard this today that hopefully can see the, you know, the hard time we went through, but that we made it, you know, and then if that takes going and getting counseling, do it. You know, I at first was, I have to be honest, I was embarrassed to get counseling. I'd never been to counseling before, and it made me feel like I was broken, or that our marriage was broken, and it was the best thing that we did, was to go and get that counseling and be able to openly talk to one another.
So shout out to Jenny Morrow for doing good work and the other therapists you guys work with.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Yeah. I have a close family member who once said to me, I could never not pay tithing because I'm just petrified that the blessings
Oh, yeah.
that I expected won't come, or that something bad will happen to me if I don't pay my tithing. What has been your experience?
That was one of them. That, you know, not paying tithing would all of a sudden,
And-
something horrible would happen.
And how have things been for you?
They've been fine.
But you know what? Bad things happen even when you
Well,
do
yeah,
pay your tithing.
absolutely.
You know?
Tithing is not, it's not,
I'll tell you though, there's
not securing
some
anything.
critical time when you're going through this process that you're waiting for something bad to happen.
Yeah.
And if something bad does happen, it could really mess you up. Because I remember not paying tithing for the first time and thinking, okay, what's going to happen, and
just wait for it.
now just by chance something bad could have happened, and and then that would have just messed with my brain. I would have been like,
Well, everyone would have said that happened because they left the church.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Right.
like what we would expect to happen.
anything. Okay, we have normal lives with normal kids and normal circumstances. Something bad could easily happen. I mean, tomorrow something bad could happen, and that it's the same no matter who you are. But yeah, certainly when you're going through the faith crisis, though, that's when it can really mess with your brain if something bad does happen during that
But in
time.
your case, your life hasn't fallen apart.
It's been the same.
No.
You haven't had financial catastrophe or medical catastrophes? Or,
No.
Okay.
But people could.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
if
it
I
could happen, yeah.
But
Yeah,
you know what? You
cer-
could be paying your tithing, the same thing.
Exactly.
With
Yeah,
the
that's
life.
Absolutely.
That's
So-
what you look for.
Yeah.
How about you guys? Is your life falling apart? Is it?
Not at all. No.
Are you financially destitute now?
We're
or-
10% richer.
Yeah, I actually have a small side story. So, part of my compensation at my company was to receive stock and options. And when I stopped believing back in 2012, and I was pretty confident of where I stood on the issues, I had traditionally paid my tithing by directly sending stock or options to the church. And so for years, when we went into tithing settlement, there would be, other than fast offerings, there was always a zero under tithing, and they knew it was because I paid some of my straight, and that's how Laurie had been conditioned. And so I just could not bear the thought of sending that check in every year and sending that stock in every year. So I actually, for many years, held on to the options and stock and did not send it, and walked in.
I did not know.
And Laurie did not know. And the way I rationalized it is I said, if Laurie finds out, it's still there and we can still send it to the church.
Well, and for 1 year, I was working 2 days a week, so I made barely any money, and I would pay my tithing on that. So to go in and say, yes, I was a full tithe payer, I was being honest, I was still believing, and I was paying this little amount, and so.
So that was a tender mercy, John, if you will, when she was finally on the same page and I showed her our stock balance.
And then I could laugh. Then I could laugh, but I wouldn't have laughed at the time. I would have been
Yeah.
so mad.
Yeah.
Don't try this at home.
Yeah,
Just tell your
exactly.
wife. It's okay to not pay the stock. Tell your spouse, wife or husband. Okay, someone asked if you miss the temple and if you miss wearing garments.
No.
No and no.
Okay, but garments that was a difficult thing to stop.
That was a
wearing
very
because-
weird thing to stop.
But I will say
took a while.
that we've talked about regrets before, and we don't have regrets, except we really wish that in our prime 20s we could have worn not me, mostly Julie. She wishes that she could have worn outfits that you could have worn.
Well, yeah,
That
during
without
the
garments.
summer and you have 3 layers on.
Yeah.
It's really hot.
And yeah, me too, because it's there's you wear a t-shirt, and having a t-shirt on top of a t-shirt was that's
summers are a
miserable.
lot cooler.
Yeah, but it was hard. I mean, if anybody thinks to themselves, I can't do it, I totally understand it, because it's a representation of your marriage in some ways. And and you realize that it's not. I still have my ring.
In fact, at one
I'm
point,
still
I even said to
married.
him, I'm like, do we need to get remarried? He's like, no, we're still married.
No, but that's the thing, is that they make it seem like this is the representation of your love for your wife. That, you know, and so in a mixed faith marriage, if somebody stops wearing their garments, a lot of times they take that personally, right? Like, oh, that means you're giving up on the marriage. But no, that's not what it means. We're still married.
I took my garments off, didn't take my ring off.
and then they say, well, what about your commitments that you made in the temple? Well, my commitments to my spouse are exactly the same.
Yeah.
Nothing different. We are still committed to each other. But commitments to the church, that's different. And those were under false pretenses. I mean, it was like having somebody make me sign a piece of paper but not telling me what was on that piece of paper, and so I don't feel bad about.
But I mean, we laugh about it now, but at the time,
It was
taking the
hard.
garments off, it was hard. It was really hard. And so for me, I just stopped wearing them at night, and I would just put on pajamas. You know what I mean? It was a slow process because it was hard.
Yeah.
You guys have anything to add about missing the temple, missing garments?
No. I mean, it was hard to take them off, but.
I mean, mine's just a different story, right? I mean, I was learning all this stuff about the endowment, and the temple became excruciating to go to. And, Ward Temple night, when she wanted to go, I was conveniently always late from work.
Always late. It was
And we always ended up doing ceilings.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. How about word of wisdom stuff? And that may be too personal, but it's definitely something that people wonder about or explore or question.
I really haven't changed the way I live.
We
I
don't.
just, for me personally, I don't see anything wrong with it anymore. I don't feel like it's anything wrong.
Alcohol, you mean?
Yeah, alcohol or,
Coffee.
whether it's a legal substance like, marijuana or an estate or something like that. I just feel like I've read the cautionary tales on the blogs and the different things, and again, not passing judgment on anyone. I just feel like, I got a lot to focus on. I'm 45 years old. I still got kids to put through college. I still got a career I'm working on. I've never tasted alcohol before. I don't know what I'm missing. So it's not like I miss it. And I just, for me, it's just a matter of, I just continue to live that kind of lifestyle. And so, it's really just a choice out of, this is who I am at this point in my life. And I just don't really feel like changing. So, it's not much more thought to it than that.
I'm the same as Doug. I mean, I will admit I have tried alcohol now.
Ooh.
Couple little sips. I would rather have my Dr. Pepper, and I'm just in the same
Wait, that's
place
bad
as
too,
Doug.
isn't it?
Well,
Well,
church standards,
our son has
but-
tried to get me to try many of Starbucks, and I guess maybe it's too late for me at 45 to acquire a taste for
taste.
coffee.
It's an acquired taste.
The ship has sailed.
Just give me some hot chocolate. So,
All right.
but again, no judgment. So,
You guys have anything to add?
Well, besides
No.
the crack cocaine.
Just the
Right.
cocaine.
No, we so we took this very, it's funny because people who do leave the church, then they all have different stories, and some of them just jump right into doing as much as they can that they couldn't do before, But Julie and I took it really slow. We're like, okay, we don't want this to be about that kind of stuff, because it had nothing to do with what was considered a sin before. We didn't want to go out and sin. That's not why we went through this in the first place. So we, for the longest time, we didn't change anything. I think over time, Julie started trying coffee, and coffee was kind of a good thing. She drinks. I drink it occasionally, but not very much.
Well, and
I don't
even when
really
I
like it.
was a member, I had plenty of friends who drank coffee and alcohol, and I never looked down on them. I never thought it was really that big of a deal. I was, especially with alcohol, I'm like, well, if you're responsible, I don't see it, as being that. In coffee, I never thought was a big deal. I just didn't drink them because I was told not to,
And now that people know we're out, we know so many members who drink coffee.
Yeah, and alcohol.
And alcohol. It's like,
Yeah.
what?
And they're going to church every Sunday and paying their tithing, so,
We're a safe place now, so. But yeah. So we took it really, really slow. We were scared about abusing anything, and so we didn't want to jump into anything. But now, I mean, we have no problem with drinking with friends or when we're special events or something. But we definitely aren't. We haven't turned into partiers.
No.
We are kind of.
Yeah.
We're old souls.
We're the same boring old people.
We're the same boring old people.
And sorry, I don't mean to bring it back to me. And this is just maybe my personality quirk a little bit too, but there was something about the fact that I was the first one to go through this, right? That I think that I still suffer from some insecurities in terms of how people view this whole situation, right? When we sat down with Laurie and Julie's father, or what their other siblings are thinking, my insecurity is that I'm pretty confident the way they're sitting there is saying, if it hadn't been for Doug, this all wouldn't have happened, right? They're not sitting there and telling themselves, oh, maybe there's some real legitimate information that I should read, right? No, it's just, this started with Doug, it's his fault, none of this would have happened, he deceived Jerry and Julie and blah, blah, blah. So, there's a part of me that feels like I almost have to go the extra mile when it comes to those types of things, whether it's the word of wisdom types of things.
Stereotypes.
Yes, to just not give anybody something they can pin this on, right? I don't want to do that. And so maybe I tend to feel a little bit more of a need to toe the line a little bit on that kind of stuff, because I feel like, if I were to drink or something like that, then it's not just that Doug deceived everyone, but that, he's also breaking the word of wisdom, blah, blah, blah. So, I guess I still have things I'm processing and dealing with coming out of the church. But I mean, if I'm honest with myself, there's part of me that is still trying to show that I really haven't changed my morality, if you will, as they define it, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, this has been a wonderful time together. You guys worn out?
Yeah.
Feel all right?
Good stuff.
I feel like I need to go for a run or something.
Marcy says, can't thank you enough for sharing your stories. You are helping so many people through a very difficult time. So thank you both, all four of you, for being willing to share your stories.
Well, it was
That's
why we
stories
did it.
that you did earlier that helped us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Us as well. Sure.
Thanks for paying it forward. And then Marino writes, will you please share Doug's research with the greater community? If not done already, a lot is already known, but would love to study it. So we could talk about that.
Yeah, I would just say go to mormonthink.com and
It's all
you're
there.
well covered.
You're well covered.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today on Mormon Stories Podcast. I want to thank these lovely families. I want to thank everyone who made comments or asked questions on the Facebook Live feed. I want to thank everyone who donates or supports Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation. Your donations and your support is what makes all this possible. We're transparent in our finances, and all the money you give to us goes directly towards supporting our mission, which is supporting people in faith crisis and their families, and preventing divorce and suicide and depression and anxiety and all the things that we work hard to try and do. So thanks to everyone who makes this possible. We had a great year. We're going to be releasing soon our annual report of all the good things that have happened. And you've all helped make this an amazing year. If you don't yet support the Open Stories Foundation, but you find this stuff useful, we would love your support. If you go up to the mormonstories.org webpage, there's a donation button on the top right. You can donate $10 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month, whatever you can afford. And you can just know that that money is going to go to these sorts of causes. And it just gives us more opportunity to help more people and to stay alive. So please support us if you don't. Thanks to everyone who does. Thanks to everyone who's tuned in. Please share this information. There are lots of ways you can support us. You can like us on Facebook at Mormon Stories Podcast. You can give us a positive review on Mormon Stories Podcast Facebook page. You can go to iTunes, give us a 5-star rating there. You can give us a positive rating on iTunes. That makes a big difference as well. And you can like us on Instagram. You can like us on Twitter. And you can just tell friends and family about us and kind of spread the word. All that stuff is also very, very helpful. And then, of course, we have several events coming up. St. George in Utah and Idaho, in Arizona, lots of different places, even in the Bahamas. We have workshops and retreats coming up to support people in transition and faith crisis. We want to encourage you to check out mormonstories.org/events, and you can get the support you need. We're also bringing Tova Mirvis to Salt Lake City, a former Orthodox Jew. We're going to interview her in early February. We're bringing Carolyn Pearson to Salt Lake City in late January. If any of you want to be a part of those events, again, you can go to mormonstories.org/events, and you can sign up for those events. And then finally, I just want to thank Amy Grubbs, Cody Layton, Sharon Price, our staff at the Open Stories Foundation. Let you know that we have a couple new job openings available. So we're looking for an events coordinator, events manager, and we're looking for a podcast producer. These are full-time salaried positions at $45,000 a year each. We really would love to hire the best person we can. So if you want to be a part of our team, we're expanding, and we'd love your support. And we'd love to have you apply. You can email johndolin@gmail.com. You can email staff@openstoriesfoundation.org, and we'd love your support. So lots of good things coming up and coming ahead. Please tune in again. And again, thanks to everyone for joining us. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
Appreciate it.
Thank
John.
you.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you guys soon.